Hey, Fidelity, how can I remember to invest every month?
With the Fidelity app, you can choose a schedule and set up recurring investments in stocks and ETFs.
Oh, that sounds easier than I thought.
You got this.
Yeah, I do. Now, where did I put my keys?
You will find them where you left them.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Welcome back to I Want That Too, the podcast where Disney merch meets Disney history. I'm entertainer writer Jim Hill, and as always, I'm joined by the lovely Lauren Hersey, who lots of people go to Vegas, but very few of them come back with the plague. How did you do this?
Oh my gosh. And listen, I'm not the only one. I was at the doctor today and I was telling her what was going on, and she had a friend there at the same time who also came back with the plague. I think it is like being on an airplane right now that, you know, everybody is coming down with this like 2-week flu-ish pneumonia situation. So still dealing with the cough, but much, much better. And listen, Vegas was so fantastic.
Oh, good.
I would totally take the plague again to, you know, to go back and have that experience. It was great.
All right, but to give you the mom points you are due, you came home with this horrible illness, which, by the way, I got early this year, kicked my ass for 3 weeks solid. But Lauren has her lovely 8-year-old son Miles, who you got off the plane and it was his birthday, and first, you did the responsible thing. In fact, your husband Eric was telling me about how you had kind of the COVID birthday, right? The family all met out in the backyard and social distance, but at least Miles got his birthday on his birthday. And then when you were well enough, I can't even imagine this. You and Eric took 20 8-year-old boys indoor rock climbing and to an arcade, right?
Yes. Man, you nailed it. We did. And after that, having 28-year-olds, rock climbing, arcade, pizza, the whole nine. I mean, by the time I got home, I literally slept until the next day. But it was a success. We're all here. He got about 10,000 V-Bucks or whatever the Fortnite situation is that, we're going to talk about Fortnite later in the show. So he's a happy camper and we made it through. Vegas was a success. So what more can you ask for?
Well, again, you're a good mom that you still did that. Okay. And by the way, you're not the only one who has a child that has a birthday this month. In fact, my daughter Alice, we are recording this on March 18th. My daughter Alice was born 31 years ago this year. So today, yes.
Oh, happy birthday, Alice.
Yep. And, but again, I live in New Hampshire. She lives in California. So it was one of those things where it's like, you had the time to box just right. Just sort of like, all right, 5 days out, put this in the U.S. postal system. It got there yesterday. She's very happy. So end of story.
Good. Okay, so she's 31. She's not 21.
No.
But before we get into today's show, I have to ask you about, did you see the news about the new adult-only bar lounge situation coming to EPCOT that we are now, we're all able to go, but Miles, even turning 8 now, he's out.
Okay. But now you were telling me as we were pre-gaming tonight's show, this is inside Spaceship Earth in what, that post-show area? Is that where this is?
Yeah, on the map, because it's actually in the Disney app and on the website. It looks like it's the back side of Spaceship Earth. It's called Geo 82, and you can't make reservations for it just yet, but they're going to be having light bites and drinks 21 and over. And I wanted to bring it up because we've been talking a lot about like Disney adults and how Disney is really catering to this group. But like I was saying earlier, what I don't understand is I feel like EPCOT is already the park for adults. Like you can eat, you can drink, you can be merry. And now they have to have like another spot for adults only.
I actually, forgive me for being blunt here, but if I'm going to partake in alcohol around Spaceship Earth, I would like to actually have a beverage before I get on the ride. Because, to be honest, it's a little...
Shots before.
Yeah. I mean, it's just sort of like, wow, yes, once again, the history of writing. I mean, I get that you get off, it's like, oh, I need a drink. But that's an interesting place to put a bar. I'm just saying.
I know. I thought it was crazy, so I wanted to mention it.
Okay.
But, I feel like it sets the tone for today's episode because we got a lot of drama, controversy, hot takes.
We do.
In today's show, which is always the fun. I mean, like, to me, that's the best type of show when we're talking about the drama. So we're going to be talking about the 70th anniversary of Lady and the Tramp. We do have a ton of anniversaries.
We do
this year.
We do, and we're going to use that as an excuse to talk about some legal issues that the Disney company found itself dealing with, and also we have a movie opening up this weekend that has a certain amount of controversy associated with it. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Before we get to the news, we need to acknowledge our sponsor, and that is of course, the lovely folks at World of DVC. And are you planning a Disney trip? It can be overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. Be Our Guest Vacations takes care of all the details, park reservations, dining, and more, so you can focus on the fun. And their expert travel planners, they offer personalized service for no extra cost to you. And whether it's a Disney cruise, a trip to the parks, or another magical destination, they'll handle everything. So if you want to learn more, visit beourguestvacations.com to start planning your next adventure today. So, all right, Lauren, we were just talking about the movie that's opening this coming weekend, which is the Disney's live-action reimagining of Snow White, with our Rachel Zegler in the title role and Gal Gadot as the Evil Queen and the Wicked Witch. So let me just ask up front, because again, I know you and your daughter Lainey have been watching Two Witches a lot lately.
Has Eric been ratting us out about Wicked?
Yes. Just mentioned.
We love it. We're obsessed with Wicked.
Okay, then that's fine. So, will we be expanding our cadre of witches out, maybe to include the Wicked Witch or the Evil Queen? Any plans to go see this?
I have mentioned on past shows, like I at one point was the world's biggest Evil Queen fan. I mean, like I've done it all. I've been to all the villains events. Like I'm a big fan. But there's so much drama going around and controversy around Snow White that I just didn't know. And honestly, I really like Rachel Zegler. Lainey and I don't know, maybe 6 months, a year ago, when the newest Hunger Games came out. She was the main role in that. I think her name was like Lucy Grace or something like that. But she was excellent. And so when I saw that she was playing Snow White, I was excited, like not realizing how much drama was going around her being in that role, which, if you're not familiar with Rachel Zegler, she's a Latina actress playing the role of Snow White. And I mean, when I think they announced that she was going to be in that role back in, was it 2021 when they announced that it was going to be Rachel playing the lead?
I think project was first announced in 2016. So this has been a long time coming. And Disney finally began plugging people into place in 2020. I want to say Mark Webb was announced as the director, and then I think you are correct, in 2021 we found out about Rachel Zegler, and I want to say that came on the heels of her performance in West Side Story, the Spielberg redo, which people said wonderful things about, and then people got all excited because Gal Gadot was going to play the evil queen, and it's like, that's a great choice, and then, things kind of went sideways. And some of that was nobody's fault, the pandemic. But I think some of this really did start with Haley Bailey, right? The Little Mermaid.
Who was Ariel in The Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
So there's mixed feelings about casting, uncharacteristic leading roles, I believe. And so Snow White being Latina, and then some of the comments that she made, I don't think really helped her case about how the whole thing needed to be, reimagined. And they went against this Snow White being the color of her skin, and it was that she was trapped in a snowstorm or survived a snowstorm. And did she say that the prince basically stalks Snow White in the original movie?
Well, I mean this in the kindest possible way, but Lord save me from 20-year-olds who know everything. And that's the thing. When you're 20 years old, you're bulletproof, and you do know everything, okay? And to be a young actress in Hollywood, and people are shoving phones in front of you and asking you pointed questions, trying to trip you up. And that's really what happened here with Rachel. Now, the irony here is that when you actually get this young woman in front of a camera, or on the stage. I mean, she's just been in New York in Romeo and Juliet. And did you see where this summer she's actually going to be in the West End for the revival of Evita? She's the youngest actress to play this role in an Andrew Lloyd Webber that musical. I mean, people love her when she's performing. It's
not talking.
And not talking. But at the same time, also worth noting, and we'll get to this in a moment, that because Snow White has finally had its premiere and people out in LA have seen it. And as Lauren is explaining here, somewhat controversial film, and there were a lot of people in LA who love a good, juicy piece of gossip and love it when somebody else's film flames out and so they can share stories. And what kind of threw them this past weekend is people who actually saw Snow White said, wow, that's a really good movie. And Rachel Zegler gives an amazing performance. And it's like, dang, you screwed up my good time. I was going to, go crap on this movie. And now look what you did to me. So,
I mean, but honestly, Jim, if you think about it, why would Disney have scaled back the premiere? They took out all the media access to the red carpet. They were just doing pre-taped interviews. What message does that send, really?
No.
They're I don't know about this. I don't know how this is going to go.
Well, now remember, this is also the Walt Disney Company that, for example, we talked about this over in Fine Tuning, but there was a trans character in the Pixar series Win or Lose. And there was a moment as they were getting this show ready to debut, this limited series on Disney Plus, and a decision was made to sort of take the trans aspect of this character Kai out of the film. Now, what's interesting is if you watch the finished series, it still tells a lovely story, and the character of Kai is wonderful. And if you're looking, you can still see elements of the trans version of the character in there. But the feeling at Disney right now is this is not a time to put your neck out. This is not a time to foment unnecessary controversy. So, and that was the thing. I mean, for example, in your show notes here tonight, you also mentioned, I mean, face it, this movie is called Snow White. not Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, because even as Disney was beginning this project, it's like, the dwarf community is going to get after us. Maybe we shouldn't do dwarves in this movie. In fact, that's the other aspect of this project that nobody's talking about now, that in 2022, when people were asking, well, it's Snow White, where she goes into the forest and she spends time with who?
I mean, they're still there, aren't they? Like CG?
Well, they are, but early on, Lauren, they were magical creatures. They weren't dwarves. Yes. And it was what
Snow White and the Seven Magical Creatures.
There we go. And evidently, when they tested the film in rough form, audiences it's like, no. This is literally the Disney film you're redoing as live action. Where are the dwarves?
Right, and if we could have live action lions, and, we just had...
Mufasa.
So we have Mufasa.
Yep.
Why can't we have the live action dwarves? And, so Peter Dinklage...
Well, yeah.
He came out and he was pissed because he's like, we'll give those roles to real... people.
Well, actually, now what's kind of interesting is Peter Dinklage actually played both sides against one another. I mean, initially he was like, oh, Disney's going to tell this backward story about dwarves living in a cave. And it just said, but at the same time, he was like, these should go to actual actors. And at the, what is it, Martin Cabral, the actor from... the Pirates of the Caribbean movie, who actually, by the way, does Grumpy's voice in this movie, and was a dwarf consultant on the film after they backed away quickly from the magical creatures. But he was actually, the interesting thing, what you just talked about them scaling back the premiere and all that. I mean, he was actually looking forward to all that, to walking the red carpet and all that. And it's just sort of like, but Martin was philosophical. He was like, well, I'm going to assume that Disney's PR department knows what it's doing. And that is the weirdest part of this story, Lauren. Now, mind you, Disney, or excuse me, in the entertainment industry, the original box office projections for Snow White were $63 to $70 million over its opening weekend in North America. Now, just within the past week, 10 days out from the film actually opening domestically, those numbers were revised downward. They were now revised to $48 to $58 million in North America. So that's effectively a 20% reduction in what was initially suggested for the box office. But just today, news broke that Disney is putting out word to the effect of, we believe over its opening weekend globally that Snow White will take in $100 million, which isn't terrible.
Honestly, they don't know. And like I was telling you when we were pre-gaming, like go back to the Eisner theory, and like they just need a single. They got to get it on base, and then they can go from there. They can make a decision, because really, I think with all the controversy, and then after people seeing it, like it's just a projection. Like they don't know. The film doesn't come out until this weekend.
No doubt. And in fact, there are actually two schools of thought. One is, that's the actual number. It'll be somewhere between 48 and 58 million. Or Disney deliberately drove the number down because it's really going to be closer to 60. And so they'll be able to go, oh, we're surprised it did better than we expected, as opposed to, well, it didn't make 73, so you're a disappointment. So, I mean, you always have to stand in Hollywood. When somebody hands you information, it's like, why are you giving me this? And the other thing to remember here, and it's an important example of the modern entertainment news ecosystem. June of 2023, Elemental came out from Pixar, and it only made 26.6 million over its opening week. It was the lowest grossing Pixar film, or opening weekend of a Pixar film ever. And a lot of people, especially coming on the heels of what had happened the year previous with Lightyear, which, by the way, also had a certain amount of controversy because remember, there was a same-sex kiss in that. And
Yeah, it was a stinker, that movie.
well, I actually liked it. But again,
Did you?
I did. But again, I saw it long after. I want to say 4 or 5 weeks after it had first come out, and people have been saying such bad things about it, and it was like I watched it and was like, I had a good time. What are you talking about? But anyway, Elemental again, has that amazingly low opening weekend, and people write it off, the Pixar failure, and then at the end of the summer, everybody who'd said, "Oh, the Pixar failure," now has to figure out how to tell the story because now Elemental at the worldwide box office is $4 million shy of $500 million worldwide. And it's one of these things where it's like, oh, the failure that made $500 million. Please explain to me how this is a failure.
Well, and I mean, I thought Elemental was great. And I mean, you had a similar situation with Encanto. So, I mean, I guess we shall see what happens with Snow White. But they are releasing some Snow White live action merch.
Yes,
so
let's talk about this. Okay, what have you seen out there?
So it's not a ton yet, to be honest. I'm like, are they waiting to like hit the button if this is a success to get more? But there's some new merch at the parks in the Germany pavilion, shocker. And so when we're talking about Snow White merch, this is just live action that I'm talking about right now. But there is a Snow White dress. It's $128, and it is the actual faces of Snow White and the Evil Queen. You got some red apples, tree branches. I don't know that this, Jim, can you look at this picture? I don't know that it actually looks like Rachel Ziegler's face. It looks like, I don't know, maybe like Barbara Streisand or something if you look at it close up. But whatever, good on you for trying. And there's a really, 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 really cool Evil Queen Mirror Mirror shirt. It's $39.99. It's the geometric designs. It feels like a little like the Frozen Ever After, some of that merch. So I really like that. But there's journal, keychain, there's a purse. So just, Google that. I think you have to be in the parks to get that specifically. But over at the Disney store, we did get a new Evil Queen limited edition doll. And there were 3,000 of this specific doll produced. And then the day that the movie opens up in theaters, March 21st, we're getting Snow White. Now, this looks a little bit more like Rachel, and she's beautiful. I mean, it is a really beautiful doll. And she has her basket with her apples. It's also $149, and there were 3,900 of this doll produced. So I'll be anxious to see how those sales go and if we're going to get more live action merch as we get closer.
Okay, now just the merch. What's interesting is there's also merch if you go to see it in the movie theaters. I want to say that Regal actually has a couple of exclusive Funko Pop figures that are really, really cool looking. That's the interesting thing. The irony is that as you seem to get across here that Disney store and the parks and that sort of thing seem to have done a limited program, whereas the movie theaters themselves seem to have taken a look at this as like, okay, I think this is going to do well. Let's have stuff ready for people to buy when they're at the concession stand.
Yeah, I mean, that's brilliant. And I wonder if that's like a test. I mean, I think the next one coming out is Lilo and Stitch live action,
It
right?
is. And by the way, you did see that. In fact, that was Drew and I were actually talking about this in the most recent fine tuning. That when I called there to talk with folks at Disney about the revised box office numbers for Snow White, they so quickly pivoted in that conversation. Hey, did you see that Lilo and Stitch trailer? Whoa! And by the way, it then inside of 24 hours, it became the second most viewed trailer in entertainment history. So, at least online. So
Yeah,
it's like,
I don't think we're going to be having the same type of conversation with that one. I mean,
this
I'm
is true.
even sitting here looking. Miles was super excited about the new Happy Meals coming to McDonald's because they're going to have a little Stitch in it. And, the next thing up I wanted to mention is the new 2025 graduation cap ears came out. I've been waiting forever for these. And like Hunter is my oldest. He had his graduation pictures done. He actually wore mine from when I was in college, and we're like, we'll just Photoshop the number. But if you look at the website, like the kid in the graduation cap for 2025, he's holding a Stitch plush.
He is.
And Stitch has like I think it looks like a diploma in his mouth, and he's wearing like a little matching graduation cap. Like, so I mean, they are going all in.
Okay.
And Lilo and Stitch.
All right. Well, can't wait. Before we wrap up the news portion here, again, you have your 8-year-old Miles, and who's into Fortnite, and we have some Fortnite-related news, right?
Yeah, kind of. It's back in the news, so I just wanted to mention it real quick, because an Imagineer was just at South by Southwest,
Yes,
and
big presentation.
Was teasing, what this. I mean, like, this was announced a year ago. The partnership with Disney and Fortnite, right? Like, so that's not new, but they were teasing how in-park experiences could be tied to the in-game experience in the metaverse. And so Josh D'Amaro, he says, like, it's a place to play games, to be social, to create content. And so, like, I'm thinking we're going to be seeing more of Disney's, big brands, Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, ESPN within the metaverse. Like, were you following this story at all?
I was, but what's interesting, and it's kind of a cautionary tale, Lauren, because it's important to understand that in just a few weeks, we're going to see Epic Universe open at Universal Orlando. And, of course, that has the Nintendo world. And remember, part of the IPs that fall under that are Pokemon. And do you remember Pokemon Go? Where,
yeah.
Okay, so the notion of you went out in the world and you collected, you literally went hunting and found Pokemon. And there were quite serious conversations about bringing Pokemon into the Universal parks. And with the idea that if you bought an admission to into a Universal park and went into the area that had the Pokemon Go activated, you'd be able to get these really rare Pokemon that you could bring home some amazing things. And what was interesting is that they tested this with the Pokemon fans about how would you feel about this? You go to Universal and, you can get and there was actually a really negative response.
Really?
Because it was like, no, that's not in the spirit of Pokemon. The fact that I would have to buy admission and go into the park and only then be able to get that. And what's interesting is I have been hearing the very same thing in regard to what's happening with Fortnite and Disney. The notion is, you're right, this deal got announced a year or so ago. But what's been happening is that Disney's been doing play testing and bringing in focus groups and this sort of thing. And the Fortnite fans aren't necessarily all that excited about. Oh no, don't mess up my Fortnite by forcing Disney into it.
Yeah, so what the Imagineer was saying was like, these are his words, like, imagine riding the Millennium Falcon, Smuggler's Run, and Galaxy's Edge, and having your in-ride performance affect your Fortnite gameplay. So, like, if you successfully smuggle cargo into the ride, you might be able to unlock a Star Wars item within Fortnite. I mean, I don't know that that is the way to get people excited.
There we go.
Or to,
There we go.
yeah. Like, I don't know. Like, having two kids who are very much into Fortnite, I don't know that that's the way. But Josh tomorrow, he basically says we have to adapt or die or be left behind, essentially. And I'm like, I think they're still trying to figure out, like, okay, like, what do we do with this?
No, absolutely. And that's a thing that clearly Disney has wonderful IP. But it then what's interesting is the notion of, okay, what if we limit this to just Star Wars? What if we limit this just to Marvel? Because that's the thing, the initial pushback when they're like, look at all the wonderful Disney IP, and Fortnite people are going, we don't like Disney IP. And it's like, it's like, oops, okay, let's start again. Though speaking of starting, we should probably get to tonight's feature. So
yes, we need to do that.
All right. So how's about this, folks? Listen to this ad, and when we get back, we're gonna talk about Lady and the Tramp and then Disney and the legal problems. But first, this.
Here at the Almond Joy Factory, where tropical vibes abound, we use soft, fresh-tasting coconut.
The crunchiest almonds and delicious chocolate candy.
Ah, but do you know what our most important ingredient is? Sometimes you feel like a nut.
Sometimes you don't.
Almond Joy's got nuts and something even way better than that. Yes, Almond Joy is made with almonds and joy.
Lowe's knows what makes SpringFest savings even better are member-only doorbuster deals. Right now, rewards members can save $40 on an Allen & Roth Chesler Gold faucet. Was $99, now $59. Plus, save $110 on a Cobalt 40-volt battery trimmer and blower combo kit. Was $279, now $169. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 3/24 while supplies last. Program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
And we're back. Okay, now on recent I Want That Twos, Lauren has shared about the Disneyland 70th merchandise. And by the way, did you see where Duffy and his girlfriend Sadie Mae are getting their very own parade float as part of Disneyland 70th?
Yes, and Duffy has an anniversary too. I think we're going to talk a little bit about that on the next show.
Okay.
But
okay.
that's super exciting.
Yeah, I'm always amazed. This time for sure, we're going to convince people stateside they really need to buy that plush. But anyway,
I'm in the camp of bring Duffy back.
Okay, all right. I think that may involve an oxygen and a defibrillator. I think that ship has sailed, Lauren, but maybe I'm wrong. But again, in addition to Disneyland 70th, this summer is Lady and the Tramp's 70th. That animated feature first came out in June of 1955. And by the way, hugely popular, Lauren. When this film first came out the same summer that Disneyland opened. It sold more tickets, it did better at the box office than Snow White did during its initial theatrical run. And a lot of the reasons that it did as well as it did was it had a really winning score with songs by Sonny Burke that featured lyrics by Peggy Lee. And by the way, the day that this podcast goes live, the 20th of March, was a significant day, a real victory for Peggy Lee. Oh, by the way, we lost her back in January of 2002 at the age of 80. But the time we're talking about, Lauren, is March 20th, 1991. And this is when Peggy Lee took the Disney company to court, saying that she had been cheated out of her profits from the sale of Disney's Lady and the Tramp on VHS. And now, Lauren, people sue the Disney company all the time. In fact, most recently, Buck Woodall, actually took the company to court, saying that they had stolen the idea for Moana.
I saw.
Yes, from a script that he wrote, Bucky the Surfer Boy. It took 5 years to get through the courts, but this past Monday, a jury of 6 women and 2 men, they rejected Mr. Woodall's claim. But this is not what happened back in 1991. A jury found that the Walt Disney Company had, in fact, cheated Peggy Lee out of her share of the profits of the sales of Lady and the Tramp on VHS, and then awarded the singer-songwriter $3.2 million. Which, by the way, the direct result of this, Lauren, was that voice actors who worked for Disney animated films after this wound up signing, a contract that was the size of a phone book, which then effectively included a clause that said, this contract covers every form of recording device known to man, and even those technologies that have yet to be invented. It was like, they were determined to close the loophole that Peggy Lee had come through. Now, this is a wild story with far-reaching consequences, and it starts all the way back in 1937, same year that the original Snow White came out, which is when Disney story artist Joe Grant one morning mentions to Walt that, what's going on at my house right now? Joe and his wife had just had a baby, but they had a dog, an English Springer Spaniel called Lady, who frankly was really kind of put out that, I'm the baby. Why are you guys paying attention to this little pink thing that poops and screams? I'm adorable. It just, the dog was just not enjoying these people bent over crib, oohing and eyeing. And Joe's telling the stories to Walt, and Walt's like, there's something there. We should do something with that. But Walt couldn't decide, is this a full-length animated movie? Is this a featurette? Is this a short? So he has Joe draw up all sorts of art. And they're like, this is something. But then World War II happens, and the project gets tabled. Anyway, we jumped ahead to the end of the war, 1945, and Ward Green writes a story for Cosmopolitan magazine called Happy Dan, the Cynical Dog. And Walt reads this thing and turns to the studio's acquisition team and is like, get the film rights to that. Because I think I just figured out what we're going to do with Joe Grant's dog. We're going to have him, or going to have her, hang out with Ward Green's dog. And because Ward Green's dog is this happy-go-lucky dog who lives on the street, and she's a pampered house dog, and it's like, okay, now we got conflict. Now I see where this movie could maybe go. So project gets put into active development in the early 1950s, and what's interesting, Lauren, is the feeling at the Disney studio is, okay, we did Cinderella in 1950, we did Alice in Wonderland in 1951, we did Peter Pan in 1953. It's like, okay, enough with the fairy tales, and especially enough with stories that are set in England, all right? What we need to do now is a story that's set here in the States.
We need an American Dog story.
We need an American Dog story, but not just, and in fact, what's so funny is that, of course, this is the early 50s. Walt's working on Disneyland, and he's face down in getting a part of that park set up that celebrates turn of the century of America. And he's like, this is a really good setting. We should put Lady and the Tramp in this period because there's lots to work with here. But at the same time, Walt recognizes, but audiences are going to want something new. And this is during the period of 3D movies and CinemaScope. And so that's what Walt decided to do. It's like, well, all right, and I don't want to do it in 3D, but let's do this in a really big format. So Lady and the Tramp, an American Dog story, gets done in the big new film art, CinemaScope. And does tremendous, as we mentioned earlier, tremendous business. But one of the reasons that it did as well as it did are these, Sonny Burke and which, by the way, not as well known today, but, big time music producer in the 1950s, did a lot of Frank Sinatra's albums. In fact, perhaps Frank's most famous song, My Way, he produced. All right, so this is a music professional, and at the same time, Peggy Lee is a singer-performer who's really, really highly thought of during that time. In fact, you probably heard her recording of Fever, which was a big hit back in the 50s. Anyway, these two end up at Disney because, again, they want a distinctly American tone for the film. And Walt's listening to the recordings, which Peggy's singing, and it's like, wow, I love Peggy's voice. We need to have her in this movie. So she actually voices, she and Sonny write 6 songs for the movie. She voices 4 characters. She does the voice of Darling, the mother, the human mother in Lady and the Tramp. She voices Peg, the Pekingese, who sings that He's a Tramp number in the movie. And then she also voices Cyan Am, the 2 Siamese cats, and that's the not very.
I am Siamese.
There we go. Not very politically correct song, these days. And the other thing worth noting is that Peggy is such a big part of this film that they actually do a whole episode of the Disneyland TV series, the thing that aired weekly on ABC is called Story of the Dog, and which they used to promote this film before it arrived in theaters. And it features like 5 minutes of Peggy Lee. In fact, she starts to perform He's a Tramp number, and what they make very, very clear is that the way Peg the Pekingese walks and shakes her rear end in this movie is pretty much based on the way Peggy Lee herself walks. So, there's no getting around the fact, especially since this thing aired on ABC and was seen in millions of homes around America, that Peggy Lee was a very big part of the success of this film. And now worth noting here that for all of her work, for writing those 6 songs, for voicing those 4 characters and serving as physical model, Peggy was paid $3,500 total.
That sounds like a steal.
Well, but the interesting thing is you have to think of it as in 1955 money, and more to the point, it was for an animated cartoon. It was the notion of this is just for kids. We're not going to pay adult money for something that's just for kids. But again, the movie goes out June 55, does great. Also does really, really well when Disney re-releases it to theaters in 1962, 1972, 1980, and 1986. Where the trouble begins, Lauren, is when Disney decides to sell Lady and the Tramp for the first time on VHS in 1987. And we'll get to why that went south in a moment. But first, this.
Take your plans out of the group chat and get long weekend ready in new Abercrombie. From day to night, pack new outfits for every part of your itinerary. Grabbing brunch? Throw on the A&F Mila dress. Then head to your dinner reservation in their new bubble hem mini dress. And yes, permission to overpack for pics with the girls. Abercrombie's best-selling Scarlet Squirt deserves a post in your feed. Your plans are worth it. Shop Abercrombie's new long weekend collection online or in store.
This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was getting frustrated by your forms. Now, Taxes is uploading your forms with a snap, and a TurboTax expert will do your taxes for you. One who's backed by the latest tech, which cross-checks millions of data points for absolute accuracy, all of which makes it easy for you to get the most money back, guaranteed. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
And we're back. All right, so we were talking about the VHS version of Lady and the Tramp. Lauren, this goes on sale October 6, 1987, and want to stress here that this was back in the day when Walt Disney Studios Home Entertainment did the whole vault thing, like the VHS version of this movie will only be on sale through March 31st, 1988, and then it will go back into the Disney vault, and who knows when it will come out. So, so a lot of people, whoa, we better hurry, better buy this. And Disney pulls out the stops promotionally. They actually have then 67-year-old Peggy Lee, who, by the way, at this point is struggling with heart disease and diabetes and is spending a lot of time walking with a cane and that sort of thing. But she does interviews to help promote the VHS, and she talks about how much fun it was to work with Walt Disney and how proud she is of the finished product. And then at the end of this, the Walt Disney Company gives Peggy $500. Like, thanks, sweetie. And that's the thing that she's like, that's what I get. And then March of 1988 arrives, and Lady and the Tramp goes back in the vault, and Disney proclaims, we just made $100 million off of selling the VHS of Lady and the Tramp. And again, Peggy's sitting at home with her $500 check going, wait a minute. And she pulls out her contract because it's like, I get paid for the movie, but, there's nothing in here about selling this thing on VHS. And why would there be? I mean, VHS tape didn't get invented till 1976. But Peggy looks through her contract, and there's language that her attorney put in there that says transcription. And that was put in there with the notion of, this would allow Peggy to perform the numbers from Lady and the Tramp in her act. She used to perform in Vegas and other places like that. And she's like, And she takes that to an attorney, and what do you think transcriptions mean? Could transcriptions mean VHS tapes? And the lawyer goes, I don't know, but let's go ask the Walt Disney Company. And the lawyer, just look, let's quietly, we'll do this privately, look, Peggy wrote 6 songs for this thing. She voices 4 characters. She's the physical model for Peg. She only got $3,500 back in 55. And you guys just literally only gave her $500 to promote this thing. And you made $100 million. Maybe a little more compensation. Yes. And, of course, Disney being Disney, their response is pound sand. We already paid her. That we are not giving Peggy Lee any more money. And the attorney's like, okay, that's fine. And then in 1988, this lawyer files suit and goes, okay, the Walt Disney Company just made $100 million off of the VHS sales of Lady and the Tramp. We want half. And it's like, let the fun begin. Now, this attorney, of course, knew there was no way he was actually going to get $50 million. for his client. But the notion was that, all right, this is how you start a negotiation, right? You lay down an outrageous number and then see what the other person comes back with. And so, but Disney, on the other hand, is like, no. Peggy Lee kicks open this door. What's going to happen? So we're going to court. And they delay and they stall, but they finally get to court in 1991. But by now, Peggy's physical condition has gotten worse, and so now she's in a wheelchair. And here's the problem: that very same episode of the Disneyland TV show that shows the company proudly proclaiming, "Oh yeah, Peggy Lee did so much work for this. In fact, she's the model for Peg." They could show that, and at the same time, here's this woman with heart disease who's struggling with diabetes in a courtroom, who is going up against the big bad Disney company. And it's like, and Disney's people like, oh, we are losing the jury. This is not a good visual. We're beating up an old lady. And sure enough, after 3 years of stalling, jury goes in and comes back out and says, well, look, we can't give you $50 million, but you clearly played a big part in the creation of this film. So how would you feel with 4% of what Disney made off of the VHSs? And which, by the way, was $3.2 million. And it's like, yeah, we could be happy with that. And
that'll do.
Disney has a heart attack because it's like they begin to hear, for example, that Mary Costa, the voice of Sleeping Beauty, Briar Rose in that film, is Disney will give you money. And even Adriana Casaletti, the original voice of Snow White, same thing. And so Disney, it's like, oh no. And so they rather than pay Peggy Lee, we're going to appeal. We're going to keep her in court. We're going to, and at the same time, they revise their document that any voice actor has to sign from this point forward to work on a film to effectively close the loophole. There will be no more transcription money. That you, again, as I mentioned at the top of the segment, you are signing a document for every possible recording device and technologies yet to be invented. And in the end, yes, Disney on appeal, they got the settlement lowered, I want to say to just $2 million, but Peggy did eventually get paid. And like I said, sadly, we lost her at the age of 80 in January of 2002. But she was the one. She was the one who effectively took Disney to court. And unlike Buck Woodall, she won. And to this day, that's why people every so often will take Disney to court thinking, well, I could be the next Peggy Lee.
What could be the next Peggy Lee?
There we go. But anyway.
Yeah, so that's a great story. Thank you for sharing. But I think it's time that we close up shop for today.
Okay. And again, I promise in the next show, Lauren and I will behave better. Okay. But if you want to stay up to date on everything that's happening across the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network, be sure that you're following us on Facebook, Instagram, and X. We post the latest updates and news from our shows, so you won't miss a thing. And if you're looking for even more insider Disney content, check out our Patreon community. A lot of stuff happening over there, like Disney Impact. That's the video show I do with Len Testa and veteran Imagineer Jim Schul.
And while you're at it, leave us a review. It really helps support the show, and it means so much to us.
Cool. All right. And if you've got questions or suggestions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us on social media or email us at, you can reach at jim@jimhillmedia.com. And Lauren, they can find you where?
Lauren at laurenhersey.com. And we get emails all the time. We love hearing from you, so keep them coming. But on that note, I do think that's it for today. Thank you for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next time on I Want That Too.